What happens when one of television's sharpest political minds goes head-to-head with someone who's made a career out of controlling narratives? What you're about to witness is an interview that started as a friendly chat but quickly spiraled into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. This is the moment Jon Stewart finally said what everyone was thinking. And Meghan Markle's reaction was nothing short of volcanic. If you want to see how this all played out, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story has twists you won't see coming. The studio lights were perfectly positioned, the cameras were rolling, and Jon Stewart sat across from Meghan Markle in what was supposed to be a standard promotional interview. She was there to discuss her latest philanthropic venture, a new foundation focused on women's empowerment. The conversation began pleasantly enough, with Stewart's trademark wit and Markle's practiced charm, creating what seemed like good television chemistry. "So, Meghan, tell us about this new foundation," Stewart opened, leaning back in his chair with that familiar half-smile. "What inspired you to focus on women's empowerment specifically?" Markle adjusted her posture, her media training evident in every calculated movement. "Well, Jon, I've always been passionate about lifting up women's voices. Throughout my journey, from my acting career to my time in the royal family, I've seen firsthand how women are silenced, how their stories are twisted by powerful institutions." Stewart nodded. But there was something in his expression that suggested he was already parsing her words more carefully than usual. "That's interesting. When you say stories are twisted, are you referring to your own experiences with the media?" "Absolutely," Markle replied, her voice taking on that familiar tone of measured vulnerability. "The British tabloids created this narrative about me that was completely false. They painted me as demanding, difficult, someone who didn't understand tradition. But the truth is, I was simply trying to use my platform to make a difference." Stewart's eyebrows raised slightly. "Right. But help me understand something. You've given several high-profile interviews where you've shared your side of the story. You've had platforms. You've had opportunities to speak. Some might argue that your voice has been heard quite extensively." The first hint of tension flickered across Markle's face. "Jon, with respect, having a platform and being heard are two different things. Yes, I've spoken out, but every time I do, it's dissected, analyzed, and often dismissed as attention-seeking. But isn't that just part of public life?" Stewart pressed, his journalistic instincts kicking in. "I mean, every public figure faces scrutiny. Presidents, senators, celebrities, they all get criticized and analyzed. What makes your situation different?" Markle's smile became more forced. "What makes it different is the level of vitriol, the personal attacks, the way my character has been assassinated simply for speaking my truth." Stewart leaned forward slightly. "Okay, but let's talk about truth for a second. In some of your previous interviews, certain claims you made were later questioned or contradicted by official records. How do you reconcile that with speaking your truth?" The atmosphere in the studio shifted noticeably. Markle's media training was still holding, but cracks were beginning to show. "I think what you're referring to are minor discrepancies that the media chose to focus on rather than the larger issues I was trying to highlight." "Minor discrepancies." Stewart's tone sharpened just enough to signal that he wasn't going to let this slide. "We're talking about specific claims about your wedding, about conversations that allegedly took place, about timelines that didn't match up. These aren't just media interpretations. These are factual inconsistencies." Markle's composure began to slip. "Jon, I came here to talk about empowering women, about making a positive difference in the world. I didn't come here to be interrogated about old tabloid stories, but here's the thing," Stewart continued, his voice maintaining that deceptively casual tone that his regular viewers knew meant he was just getting started. "You built your entire post-royal brand on these stories. Your credibility, your foundation's credibility, it all rests on people believing your version of events. So when there are inconsistencies, doesn't that matter?" "My credibility?" Markle's voice rose slightly, the first real crack in her armor. "I've been transparent about my experiences. I've shared painful personal moments to help other women feel less alone." Stewart nodded slowly, "And I respect that. But transparency means being accurate, doesn't it? It means acknowledging when you might have gotten details wrong. Or when your perspective might be just that, your perspective, not necessarily objective truth." "So now you're saying my trauma isn't real?" Markle shot back, her media training finally failing her completely. You're saying that what I experienced, what I lived through, is just my perspective. The studio fell silent, except for the hum of cameras still rolling. Stewart paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. I'm not questioning your trauma, Meghan. I'm questioning the way you've chosen to package and present it. There's a difference between sharing your experience and crafting a narrative that serves your current interests. Markle stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the studio floor. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. I came here in good faith to discuss important work, and instead, you're attacking me just like everyone else. Whoa, hold on, Stewart said, raising his hands in a gesture that was both calming and commanding. Nobody's attacking you here. This is what we call journalism. I ask questions, you answer them. If you can't handle questions about public statements you've made, then maybe you shouldn't be making them. Markle remained standing, her hands trembling slightly with either anger or adrenaline. This isn't journalism, Jon. This is a hit job. You invited me here under false pretenses. False pretenses. Stewart's voice carried a mix of disbelief and amusement. I invited you here to talk about your foundation. You're the one who immediately pivoted to your royal family grievances. I was just following the conversation you started. I mentioned my experiences to provide context for my work, Markle snapped. Everything I do now is informed by what I went through. Stewart leaned back in his chair, his expression becoming more serious. And that's exactly the problem. You can't separate Meghan the advocate from Meghan the victim. Every cause you champion, every speech you give, every foundation you start, it all comes back to your personal grievances with the royal family. Those aren't grievances. They're experiences that shaped me. Markle fired back, her voice getting louder. And yes, they inform my work because I understand what it's like to be silenced by powerful institutions. But you weren't silenced, Stewart pointed out, his tone remaining frustratingly calm. You walked away from that institution and then spent the next several years talking about it extensively. That's not being silenced. That's having a very public platform to air your complaints. Markle's face flushed with anger. Complaints. You're reducing my trauma to complaints. I'm reducing your public statements to what they actually are, Stewart replied evenly. Look, I get it. You had a difficult time. The British press was brutal. The royal family wasn't supportive. It was hard. But at some point, you have to move on from being the victim to being the hero of your own story. I am the hero of my story, Markle shot back. I left an abusive situation. I protected my family. I'm using my platform to help others. Stewart shook his head slowly. No, you're using your platform to relitigate your past while claiming to help others. There's a difference. When you talk about women's empowerment, it always comes back to your own empowerment. When you discuss mental health, it's always about your own struggles. It's not about helping others. It's about validating your own choices. The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Markle stared at Stewart for a long moment, her breathing clearly audible in the now silent studio. How dare you, she whispered, then louder. How dare you question my motivations when you know nothing about what I've been through? But I do know, Stewart said, leaning forward again, because you've told the same story dozens of times on dozens of platforms. The problem is, each time you tell it, the details change slightly. The villain gets more villainous, your victimhood gets more pure, and the stakes get higher. That's not true, Markle protested, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Isn't it? Stewart pulled out a tablet from beside his chair. Because I did something crazy before this interview. I actually went back and watched your previous appearances. I read your statements. I compared timelines. Want to know what I found? Markle's eyes widened slightly, clearly not expecting Stewart to come armed with research. I don't know what you think you found, but ... double quotes. I found inconsistencies, Stewart interrupted. I found a pattern of escalating claims that don't match up with documented facts. I found someone who's built an entire brand around being wronged, and who keeps needing to up the ante to maintain relevance. You're twisting everything, Markle said, her voice becoming shrill. This is exactly what they did to me in the UK. They took my words, they manipulated them, they used them against me. Stewart set down the tablet and looked directly at her. Meghan, I'm not twisting anything. I'm literally quoting you. Your own words, from your own interviews. If they sound bad when repeated back to you, maybe the problem isn't with the repetition. The problem is with people like you who pretend to be allies but are really just looking for ways to tear down successful women, Markle accused, pointing an accusatory finger at Stewart. Successful women. Stewart's eyebrows shot up. What exactly have you succeeded at besides being famous for being unhappy? You left acting for the royal family, you left the royal family for Hollywood, and now you're leaving measurable impact for celebrity activism. What's the actual success here? The question hit like a slap. Markle's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice. I've raised awareness. I've started important conversations. ... double quotes. You've raised awareness about yourself, Stewart cut her off. Every conversation you start is about your own experiences. Even this foundation we're supposed to be discussing today, tell me, honestly, is it really about helping other women, or is it about rehabilitating your own image? Markel's composure finally shattered completely. You know what? I'm done. I don't have to sit here and be attacked by someone who clearly has his own agenda. My agenda. Stewart laughed, but there was no humor in it. My agenda is asking public figures to be accountable for their public statements. If that feels like an attack to you, then maybe you're not ready for the kind of platform you're trying to build. I've been building platforms since before you knew who I was, Markle snapped. Stewart's response was immediate and cutting. No, you've been climbing onto other people's platforms since before I knew who you were. There's a difference between building something and using something that already exists. The words hung in the air as Markle stared at him in shocked silence, clearly realizing that this interview had spiraled completely out of her control. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before Markle finally found her voice again, though it was noticeably shakier than before. You think you're so clever, don't you? Sitting there with your research and your gotcha questions trying to make me look bad, Stewart's expression didn't change. I'm not trying to make you look bad, Meghan. You're doing that all by yourself. Trying to tear me down for sport, Markle shot back, but her words lacked the fire they'd had earlier. People like me, Stewart repeated. You mean journalists. People who ask follow-up questions. People who don't just accept everything at face value. He paused, letting the words sink in. Because if that's what you mean by people like me, then yeah, I'm guilty as charged. Markle began pacing behind her chair, clearly agitated. You're not a journalist right now, Jon. You're a bully with a platform. Stewart's tone remained maddeningly calm. Because I asked you to explain inconsistencies in your public statements, because I questioned whether your foundation is really about helping others or helping yourself, that makes me a bully. Yes, Markle said firmly, because you're using your position of power to attack someone who's already been through enough. Stewart leaned back and crossed his arms. And there it is again. Everything comes back to what you've been through. Even when we're talking about your current work, your current choices, your current statements, it all gets filtered through your past victimhood. My experiences inform who I am, Markle insisted. No, your experiences have become who you are, Stewart corrected. And that's the problem. You're not Meghan Markle, the advocate, or Meghan Markle, the philanthropist. You're Meghan Markle, the victim, and every single thing you do has to be viewed through that lens. Markle stopped pacing and turned to face him directly. So what if it is? So what if my experiences drive my passion for justice? Because it's not about justice, Stewart said, his voice cutting through her defenses like a knife. It's about revenge. It's about proving that you were right and they were wrong. It's about making everyone who doubted you pay for doubting you. The accusation hit its mark. Markle's face went white, then red, as she struggled to formulate a response. That's not true, isn't it? Stewart pressed on. Every interview you give, every project you announce, every speech you make, it's all designed to prove the same point. That you were wronged, that you're better than the people who wronged you, and that you deserve recognition for overcoming their wrongness. And what's wrong with that? Markle demanded, her voice rising again. What's wrong with that is it's not sustainable, Stewart explained. You can't build a career on being wronged. You can't build a foundation on grievance. You can't help other people when you're still so focused on your own pain. I have helped people, Markle protested weakly. Have you? Stewart challenged. Or have you helped yourself by appearing to help people because every charity you work with, every cause you champion, somehow the story always ends up being about you and your journey and your growth? Markle's hands clenched into fists at her sides, You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Stewart replied. "I've been in this business long enough to recognize someone who's using activism as therapy. And that's what this is. You're working through your own issues in public and calling it advocacy. Even if that were true, which it's not, what would be wrong with that?" Markle shot back. Stewart's expression became almost pitying. "Because real advocacy isn't about you. Real change happens when you can put yourself aside and focus entirely on the cause. But you can't do that because you are the cause." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Markle stared at Stewart for a long moment, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for a comeback that wouldn't come. Finally, she found her voice, though it was barely above a whisper. "I came here to talk about empowering women." "No," Stewart said gently but firmly. "You came here to use women's empowerment as a vehicle to talk about yourself, just like you always do." Markle's composure crumbled entirely. Tears welled up in her eyes as she grabbed her purse from beside the chair. "I don't have to listen to this anymore." "No, you don't," Stewart agreed. "But running away won't make it less true." "I'm not running away," Markle said, though she was already moving toward the exit. "I'm choosing not to engage with someone who's clearly biased against me." Stewart stood up from his chair for the first time during the interview. "Meghan, wait." She turned back, hope flickering in her eyes that maybe he was going to apologize. Maybe he was going to take it all back. Instead, Stewart delivered his final blow. "The next time you want to help women, try starting with the woman in the mirror. Figure out who Meghan Markle is when she's not a victim, and then maybe you'll have something real to offer the world." Markle's face contorted with rage and humiliation. "How dare you?" she whispered, then louder. "How dare you speak to me that way? I'm speaking to you the way someone should have spoken to you a long time ago," Stewart replied calmly, with honesty instead of enabling. Without another word, Markle turned and stormed toward the studio exit, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back one final time. "This interview is over," she declared. "Yes," Stewart said, settling back into his chair as the cameras continued to roll. The studio door slammed shut, leaving Stewart alone on set. He looked directly into the camera and shrugged slightly, that familiar half-smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Well, that went well," he said to his audience, and somewhere in the control room, someone started laughing. "So what do you think? Was Jon Stewart too harsh? Or did he finally say what needed to be said?" Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more unfiltered moments like this one. What other celebrity do you think needs the Jon Stewart treatment?